Great. So why don't we start with a recap of what we talked about last time? Then we introduce ourselves, or why don't we introduce ourselves in case that there's any new participants here? I'm going to stop sharing right now so I can see all of you guys. And just tell us what brings you into the working group meeting for art, culture, and history for the Westward neighborhood. And what do you hope to achieve today? I can start calling you guys out by the list that I have here. I hope you don't mind. And if for any reason you're in another meeting, you're in an office, you're driving, and you cannot join with your voice, feel free to text using the chat and the reactions that you have at the bottom of your screen. So first on my list is Amy Bakduro.
Hi, everybody. Amy Bakduro, manager of the Westward Community Initiative.
Great having you, Amy. Elizabeth?
Hi, Elizabeth Rosen. I'm a landlord in the West Ward, and I'm a writer.
Great having you. Welcome. Next, I have Eric.
Hi, everyone. Just a West Ward homeowner. Nice to be here.
Great having you, Eric. Matt Leska.
Hi, I'm Matt Leska. I live in the West Ward. I'm an artist.
Thanks for joining. Next, Jen.
Hi, I'm Jen. I live in the West Ward. I'm a professor of media arts and a curator.
Thanks for joining us. Laura Faye.
Hi, I'm Laura Faye. I live downtown Easton. I used to own a business in downtown, and I'm just interested in helping the West Ward grow.
Thanks for joining us today, Laura. And last but not least, Tanya.
Hi everyone, my name is Tanya Ruiz. I am the assistant manager to the Westward Community Initiative. I am also a Westward resident, so I'm super excited to be here. Thanks.
Great. I'm so happy to have all of you guys. Thank you so much for your time today. As you can see, my name is Andrea Gonzalez. I am working with Collabo. We are the planning coordinators of this Choice Neighborhood Initiative for the West Ward. For the Westward area. We are currently working on the plan. The purpose of this working group is to review the brainstorming that took place on the first session. The brainstorming was inspired on the original visioning exercise that we did at the Paxinosa School on the National Night Out event, where we heard the input from the community and they told us what were their concerns and what they wanted to see for their neighborhood. So today we're going to review what were the most resonating ideas from the brainstorming session we did last time. And we're going to go through an exercise where we rank them. So we're going to have a conversation around what are going to be your preferences. How do you think that they're going to affect the neighborhood? Are they going to be good for someone and bad for others? Can we achieve a greater good here? And in the end, there's going to be one more session at the end of March where we're going to finally determine which strategies we're going to be focusing on, which partners we need to bring to the table. And then the result is going to be written as part of the plan. And the plan will be then submitted to HUD through the Greater Eastern Development Partnership, as well as with the Housing Authority. And then HUD will decide if they issue funding so that we can make the plan happen. Do you guys have any questions about the process at the moment? Great. So without further ado, I am gonna start sharing my screen and we dive right in. How about that? All right, so I can't see you guys anymore. So make sure that you're using the reactions. Feel free to interrupt me at any minute if there's something that you completely disagree, or there's something that is really, really like you can't hold it in. Like, by all means, feel free to interrupt me. Use the chat, use the reactions, because I only have one tiny screen today. And the only way that I am going to be able to see you guys is if I see the screen flash that you're trying to speak. Okay. Thank you. So this is the original board where we were working in our last session. And as you remember, the board is divided in 5 sections. These are the 5 sections that we will include in the plan. We already held working meetings about housing and business, transportation and open space, community health and safety, equity and inclusion, and today, art, history, and culture, right? So the last meeting last month, we reviewed the board that was designed by an artist live at Paxinosa. And all of this scribbles and on pink were the live feedback that the artist was getting. So the artist was creating this mind map to include all of the feedback that she was hearing from residents. And then from there, on our working meeting, we came up with all these yellow Post-it notes, right? So I'm gonna read them aloud to you just to refresh our memories. And then we start talking about if we're missing something, should we add anything else, and then we go on to the ranking. So some of the greatest things that came to our attention from our brainstorming session last time was that we want to acknowledge that we are in Native American land in whatever art interventions we are going to bring into the community, right? We talked about having walking tours that acknowledge other groups that have lived in the neighborhood, like Jewish, Lebanese, and Italian heritage groups that are still in the neighborhood, and how do we invite them as well to be part of this initiative, right? We want to create community spaces for gathering that foster creativity and lead to community building. We think that walking tours would be great to enhance the identity and feeling of belonging. We are missing Lafayette College in this group. How do we bring them in? This is the second time I hear this comment today. Yes, if anyone has any contact, if anyone has any idea of how to bring Lafayette College to this table, we have one more working group meeting next month, and it would be great to have everyone involved, right? We want to make these interventions, and we want to make the art walks, if these are something that is going to take place. We want them to make them inclusive, and we want to be grounded in history. Cleaning up and getting garbage off the streets. Okay, so now we are overlapping a little bit with the outdoor space planning group. And additionally, it would be motivating and helpful for the residents as well to have a cleaned up and beautified environment, right? We are talking about creating businesses that live and work in the neighborhood so that their connection to place can be enhanced. We want to make events serious. The Eastern Area Community Center is a great place to reach parents and kids. We want community art outreach, including for kids and adults. Again, maybe Lafayette College would be a good source for internships and career mentorship. We want art to reach teenagers and kids. We talked about Squeaky Wheel in Buffalo as a precedent that we could look out for potential inspiration and perhaps even technical assistance. We talked about artist mentor programs with local working artists as well as with local kids. We want to enhance the connections to place and bolster the local talent in an international arena. Local mentorship would grow identity connections and build up on local talent. Lehigh Valley Engaged Humanities Consortium would be a potential partner. We have not been able to get them to join the meeting yet, but we will continue our outreach to these institutions. Finding space is the greatest challenge, apparently, and then funding in order to get this type of programs started, right? And then these programs will lead towards more inclusive and integral development. We want a place with working equipment that could lead to talent development for for the local artists that would be there, right? We want initiatives that are culturally appropriate and socially just. Paxinoso students can benefit from a strategy that includes them. We want the community to have a say on what events we are offering. Summer programs for youth. The State Theater of the Performing Arts would possibly be a partner. We want equity and justice in the intake of the kids that participate in summer programs. How about this program being start and run with the GDP? Someone even proposed a name for the working groups, name it the words. That sounds really great. We want the community to create events that include films, poetry, reading, music performance, and we want the community to run the space itself. So we're talking about autonomy. And then we should find an organization that co-applies and co-leads this organization so that they can assist in managing the funding and procuring the funding as well. We want to open opportunities to engage and participate. We want to be able to be diverse and inclusive. We talked about potential partner organizations that we have been unable to reach as of yet. More outreach and more accessible meetings that bring more diverse people to the table. We are working on it. We certainly are. Houses of worship already have community events. We should be engaging with them and collaborate with them, 100% agree. And we talk about different ethnic groups like the African American Heritage Group, the Latino Hispanic Center of the Lehigh Valley, and chapter of the NAACP as potential partners that we could engage. People talked about community and media arts, talked about murals, turning buildings around through public art. We brainstormed about artists in residence program. We talked about how to fund it through grants from the National Endowment of the Arts. And we want all of this to be collaborative and bring artists from outside to train local artists so that we can grow the recognition of our area and of our local talent. So we talked about examples like Jacob's Produce could be a great community workshop. We talked about the museum and public library are great resources that shouldn't be overlooked. Paxinosa School could be one of those community hubs where we start trying to bring people out to foster this type of engagements. However, we have the question of how do we actually get them to come out? Improved streetscape would definitely increase success of our initiatives. And we also talked about a wonderful chaotic place. We want to embrace the quirkiness and draw from our strengths of the things and talents that we already have in the neighborhood. And how do we open and expand the community engagement, perhaps making events that are family oriented? And could this possibly lead to rebranding of the West Ward? So all of this with looks at really building up the community. So I think that I mostly covered everything. Do you, and I recognize that I went really fast because these are a lot of comments that we had from our last working group meeting. Do you guys think that I missed anything, or are there other things that should be on this board right now? And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so I can see you guys again. Any feedback? Did I miss anything? Because otherwise, I'm gonna send you guys an invite to the poll. If you saw the email, and if at any minute right now you're having technology challenges or anything, you can always go back to the email I sent, and there's a link to a survey. So bear with me 1 second. I'm gonna send a link on the chat. One moment. So that you guys can access the survey. And we are gonna see a list of the priorities that the ideas that I just read through. were grouped by theme. And then on the survey that I'm going to send you, I am asking you guys to rank them in order of importance. These are your personal preferences. It's great if you are thinking about the feasibility, if you are thinking about which one is going to be easiest or most efficient. But this should be at this moment your personal preferences. And then we will open the conversation as to why. And we can even explore it further as to how. So give me 1 second. I'm sending you the link in 1 minute. Great. You should have got the link yet. If it doesn't work for any of you, can you please let me know and I'll send you the link again. And meanwhile, I'm gonna share my screen. Can you guys see it? So I'm gonna give you guys 5 minutes to read through the options and go ahead and rank them. And meanwhile, I'm gonna read them aloud for anyone that can't access the survey as well as for the recording. So the strategies for arts and culture that we saw from the board are improved and beautified streetscapes, including signs, banners, and landscape. We talked about a community arts center, an outdoor concert and film series. We talked about additional public art pieces, block parties, including tie-in with local businesses. We talked about arts entrepreneurship training program, creating additional maker spaces, doing gallery and studio walks and event series, youth arts education mentorship programs, and rebranding of the Westward. So please take a minute to take the survey. Please rank all of the options according to your personal preference, and then we will have a conversation around it. You guys can still see my screen, right? Thank you.
Hey, Andrea.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I don't mean to be a pain, but I was like trying to figure out how to view the Mentimeter while you were explaining what to do. So I have to ask you for instructions again. So the question is, how would I rank the following? And then I can choose up to 10 or just choose one as number one. Oh, I see.
You just order them. You have to order all 10.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
And then hit submit. Does anyone else need more time? All right. So it looks like, oh, answers are still coming in. I'm gonna give you guys then just one more minute. We are 8 participants in this meeting. And it looks like I got 8 answers. So I think that we should be okay, right? So it looks like the winners are improved and beautified streetscape, creating a community arts center, and an outdoor concert and film series. Does everyone agree with that? And there's no right and wrong answer. Oh, the options are changing. I love it. Improved and beautify streetscapes, community art center, and outdoor concert and film series are still at the top. So that's great. Thanks guys so much for your participation. Give me 1 second while I switch screens and I start taking notes. And this is where I open the floor to everyone because I want to hear, do you agree with the order of these priorities, or is there something else that you would have preferred to see first? Or how do you think that this is gonna work out in the neighborhood? Let's start talking about improved and beautified streetscape. Anyone? Meanwhile, I am taking notes, so bear with me.
You want us to discuss that option?
Yes, please. Why don't you start if you're comfortable doing that?
And you want us to just respond to that one question? Ranking.
Right now. Yes.
Well, I have a thought. I'll just say, I think that if there's more, I know that there's already, Amy, you probably know a lot about this. If it was lighter at nighttime, you know, like if just more streetlights and just if it was lighter at nighttime. That's my thought. That's it. Not more than that.
You're on par with what we talked about in our health and safety committee, was a lot about street lights there. Yeah, which would help make a
And
nicer.
then also, you know, not to like, I hate to be negative, but like, I don't know how, like all the power lines, you know, it just looks terrible. I don't even know how many power lines are actually used as power lines these days, or if they're just abandoned and it's expensive to take them down. But that would be a real, I think that would be a real way to beautify. It looks a bit like God's pocket or something, you know, like it really, you know, with
Matt, as a landlord, I can tell you that a lot of them are abandoned. Because we had to tear,
right? Like,
yeah, they are. We had to tear down, I don't know, there must have been 30 additional lines that were at our property that we had to, you know, go through and see what they were actually connected to.
what was the process for
our building
doing
was
that?
jerry-rigged, right?
Was the process for doing that, like, having done it, do you think, is it unrealistic to try to do that across an entire neighborhood?
Well, I mean, we weren't dealing with things necessarily that seemed to be going to the city's power grid. So much as just the building itself seemed to have been jerry-rigged in a lot of ways, but things were going to like cable television, satellite dishes, and things like that. And that's just a matter of getting up there and then literally following lines to see where they go. And in terms of the bigger power lines, I mean, my sense was in looking at it that those are kind of in order. I mean, they're not additional lines. It's that things have been kind of snapped onto them and television lines. And that's a matter of getting up there and just following that back. I think that that's something that, you know, everyday people probably can do, but since it involves electricity potentially,
Yeah,
maybe not, you know. We were willing to do it on our property, but.
Amy, you raise your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, kind of in that same regard, satellite dishes that accumulate on houses because it costs something to remove them. And when a new tenant moves in with new service, they put a whole new dish in as opposed to reusing an old one that's there.
It's the stupidest thing ever.
Yes. Yeah. And the fact that you have to pay to have it taken down is a whole nother piece to this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. I am loving these comments, guys. So perhaps we could talk about talking to, I don't know, like city council, maybe our city, I don't know who would take care of it at a city level, but perhaps like starting developing some type of initiative to remove them as blight.
Andrea, I
about-
actually think that that's something that could go out to landlords. That's something that we can encourage landlords to do. Because it, like I said, it doesn't, as a landlord, you know who's living in your buildings, and you can say, are you guys using RCN or are you using DirecTV? And then you can get up there and take that stuff down. So I think that that's an initiative that can go out to property owners.
Wonderful. I love it.
It does put the cost onto a landlord though. So I think there has to be some teeth behind it that they need to be removed. Otherwise, if it costs something, not all landlords are gonna take that on willingly. You know what I mean, Liz? Like you're
Yeah,
a
I mean-
responsible landlord, so. But
I mean, do you mean the cost in terms of getting somebody
Removing-
up on roofs to do it?
yeah, like I mean, I'm sorry, maybe I'm talking directly about the satellite dishes because it costs something to have them removed. I don't know that it can just be a landlord going up and unscrewing. I'm not,
Oh, really?
that I don't know.
That would be worth finding out.
Yeah.
Because if that's something, if it's a matter of like landlords and property owners taking things down themselves and not, for instance, having the physical ability to do that, then maybe the city could have some kind of partnership that would provide the cherry picker to do that, or some kind of partnership with the city, with Public Works, with Dave, that would have the ability to actually get on to those heights to do it.
The city would do that on private property, I have to say. They're
Not even
pretty-
if the property owner says,
No, because you're kind of doing work for somebody, you're doing work for a private property owner. It would be like me calling the city and saying, hey, can you fix my roof? Because you have a cherry picker.
would they allow private property owners to rent something from them at a subsidized?
No, not liability wise. That would be yeah.
Shh.
Thank you, guys. Laura, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think improving and beautifying the streets is like super, super necessary and should be a big part of, the whole grant. I'm just wondering how much I know it would improve the culture, but I feel like it's more relevant to like outdoor spaces or housing. Is it something that's like a super, super priority for improving the arts and the history of the spot? I think it's completely necessary, but if this like work group gets an allotted amount of money, I guess I'm questioning if that should be the first thing it should go to, or if it seems a bit stronger in like a different work group. I don't know.
This meeting is specifically dedicated to art, culture, and history. So the whole plan is actually having a dedicated section to art, history, and culture. So we recognize that this is a thing that really traditionally has not been at the forefront of any funding agency. And this is why we are being like purposeful into like implementing or incorporating art, history, and culture in everything that this plan is doing. So if we are talking about traffic interventions and we are talking about beautifying housing, like we want to include art in everything else that we are doing. So like we mentioned on the board, like murals, we mentioned public art, like all of those things like come into play when we're talking about like beautifying the whole community, not only housing or not only streetscape, like everything.
Yeah.
So did you have an idea of additional things that you want to see in terms of beautifying like the streetscape?
No, I mean, what everyone's mentioning sounds great. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. I see a comment on the chat. People are agreeing, like right now, specifically, we are not talking about art, we are talking about beautifying a landscape. It also includes like, how do we feel when we are walking from one street to the other? Is there a street that makes you feel sad, and is there another street that makes you feel happy? I see Jen has her hand up.
I agree
you.
that I just wanted to, I know that conversation is sort of over, but I just wanted to add to it. I think that with in terms of the wires hanging all over off of the buildings, I think that maybe that's a code office thing. And if landlords are getting code by.
Your audio went out, Jen.
She looks frozen, Andrea.
Oh. Hopefully she will come back.
Yeah.
But she was talking about old wires and obsolete infrastructure can be worked into the building codes. I strongly agree. And that way, perhaps they can be worked on as if they were violations, and then people would get fined.
I have a question. So,
Yes.
and I guess, Amy, you might have the answer to this. Is there, so I know that the historic district has very strict parameters about, say, colors that they can paint their houses. Any kind of renovation that they do has to fit into pre-existing things. Is the West Ward under those same parameters?
No, so the historic district, I will say they do not regulate color, but they regulate the front facades, and depending on where rear facing properties are, they can regulate that as well. We do not have anything like that in the neighborhood. We tried to get a conservation district in place, which is it's different than a historic district, but it sets certain regulations and parameters into housing like modifications. So for instance, if you have windows, we don't want you to put smaller windows in there and use plywood to fill in the space where your smaller window went. You know, we want you to keep the proportions to windows and doors appropriate to the house. So things like that would be helpful in a conservation district and help kind of keep that historic feel to the neighborhood. Unfortunately, we don't have anything like that in place. And there was a lot of talk about it. There's some political piece to it because kind of the gentleman leading the charge is persona non grata in City Hall. So it's made it a little more difficult, but there was definitely a lot of talk about that. It's in our neighborhood plan too, that something like that should come about. One of the things that we did create during COVID was some design guidelines in the hopes that when we had a facade grant program, it would give us some teeth to and some recommendations. So when people applied for a facade grant, they were doing things in a more historic manner and not trying to get money to put in the Home Depot special door and smaller windows and things like that. So it would give us some teeth in a future facade grant. But yeah, there's no city regulations for this neighborhood. Only downtown is considered, has a historic district board to regulate things.
So I was wondering whether something that kind of crosses over Laura's question about, you know, is the streetscape our priority as the arts group, and our stuff about art, whether there would be the possibility of having like a special kind of light fixture for our outdoor lights when that's going in, something that would mark out this area as, you know, like whether it's something that kind of harkens back to, you know, a 19th century look or whatever that might be, to do that with signage, to do it with light fixtures and that sort of thing, as opposed to color. I mean, I think color is great. There's a particular green apple color that I'm not that fond of on one of the houses in the historic district, but yes. And And I just wondered whether something like that, I'm thinking about like how Philadelphia has certain kind of light fixtures in certain areas that make it cohesive in those kind of little details. And that might be something that kind of crosses over these two areas of art and streetscape.
I have a follow-up comment to what you just said, Elizabeth. You just mentioned Philadelphia, and exactly what you described was about what I was going to mention. Like there's this neighborhood in Philly called Fishtown, and all of the houses that were members of the neighborhood association of the Fishtown group, they got together, and as a fundraiser tool, they started selling this fish little sculpture that everyone decided to attach to their door. And now it's 20 years later, and all of the houses in Fishtown now have a fish outside the door, and you know that you're in Fishtown because houses have fishes. So I think that it's a great implementable idea. And in this case, for the neighborhood association, it was also a fundraising strategy. So I just wanted to put it out there. I see Tanya raise her hand.
So I was going to switch it up and say that I think we should include art and labeling the West Ward. I have just found that it seems like a lot of people don't actually know what the West Ward is. So if we can incorporate the West Ward labeling with just like pretty art all around the West Ward, I think that's a good idea.
Thank you. I agree. So maybe this can also be like one of those art initiatives where we create an RFP, like a call for proposals. What is the identity of the West Ward, and perhaps calling for an artist that designs like what the identity is gonna look like, and then perhaps like I am just brainstorming right now. This turns into one of those fundraising initiatives, like, okay, once we choose like the winning design, like we create it, and homeowners or XYZ, everyone can have it available for purchase, and they can choose to identify their homes like that.
I also think that you could involve the West Ward community in choosing it, you know, and as a part of having buy-in from everybody. If you provide a website with several choices from artists from the West Ward, and then as a property owner in the West Ward, you get actually to vote on it, then everybody has to come and see it to vote on it. And there's buy-in from people to say, this is what we're going to use to represent ourselves, to brand ourselves. And it kind of goes to the branding idea as well.
I love it. Eric, excuse me, Matt, you raise your hand.
Yeah, you know, I have an idea kind of after listening to what Tanya said, and also to your story about Fishtown. I think a small opportunity to do that on all the houses, something like the fish emblem, would be just like a transom art, like transom numbers.
Yes.
You know, like,
Mhm.
and it could have a West Ward branded style, or it could just, whatever it is, it could have a West Ward branded style. It could be installed by kids in the neighborhood. You know, you teach them how to do it. And Cliff Ross, I don't know if you guys know Cliff Ross, but he's got a graphics place downtown. He would love it. He would print them all. I mean, he would charge, I'm sure, but like, you know, I think the house numbers in the not transom art, but a house number, you know, for every house. If every house had a West Ward fashioned transom number made by Cliff Ross, you got an East End movement right there.
He would love it, I'm sure. I see Amy raise her hand.
I was just gonna say, save the transoms. That's my, that's always what I say for West Ward. Bring them back because they get covered over so quickly here.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, there's one down the block from you right now. Like, it was there, and they're putting new siding on it, and there it went.
wow.
Yeah,
Bummer.
I know, but it maybe, but
Yeah, maybe there's enough. I actually just assumed everybody had a transom, but maybe they don't anymore.
yeah, I mean, I had to open mine back up, but I think that's probably initiative to do that. I think that's the cool part about it. You get people talking about those architectural details and,
Yeah.
you know, is it there? Do I have one? You know, I think that's a
Yeah.
cool story.
Great. Thank you guys for your comments. Anyone else has some final comments about improved and beautified streetscape before we move to number 2? And I can't see all of you guys. So if you're nodding, like, I apologize. I would more kindly request a verbal affirmation. So if you guys are ready, we can move to community art space. This was the number two ranked priority. And I just wrote here education strategy, but in reality, we're talking about art here. I remember from our last meeting that having a community art space was one of the strongest ideas. So how do you guys feel about the importance of this one right now being in number 2? And go ahead, like, feel free to mute and unmute yourselves as well.
One of the reasons that I ranked that highly is because I thought it incorporated a lot of the more individual things that we had about artists, art galleries, and all kinds of things like that, is that I thought a community space like that allows artists to promote themselves and to let people know that they exist somewhere else in the neighborhood as well. So that was one of the reasons that I ranked it highly.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Elizabeth. Matt, you are on mute.
You know, the last time that we talked, I didn't even realize that there was a community arts center. I just thought that was the place you go to vote. And what is going on in there? Like, is it in use? Do people go there? Are there events there? And like, what's the, like that whole building is there. Why is it in use as a community arts center?
Is that the one that's attached to the State Theater? Is that what you're talking about?
No, like over on not Butler. It's like where Walnut meets
Washington.
Washington. I
Oh,
live
is
right
this where the
there.
Boys and Girls Club meets?
It's more of like a community center, right?
Yeah, it's a community center. You go like, but could you take over a room in there and start small, get something moving, and then of course it gets bigger or it fails.
So it is currently used. They are their own entity. So it's called the Eastern Area Community Center. It's not an art space center, Matt. So they run primarily kids programming in there. Like during the summer, they have 5-day-a-week summer camp in there. They do evening programming. Through the school year, they have an after-school program for kids. There's a Cops and Kids reading room in there. There's actually a basketball court on the 2nd floor and a wrestling room on the 3rd floor. And both of those are used heavily. They have a cheerleading group, like a cheerleading, I don't know what you want to call it, team or such, that's there. They do co-ed basketball for younger kids. They have a wrestling program. They also have a senior program that happens Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, a little bit earlier in the morning. And they're trying to bring up pre-K preschool there as well for lower income kiddos too. So it acts more as a youth center than it does as a community center. But it does get used occasionally for like city council meetings or other larger community meetings, because when you walk in, that first space, that first floor space is really big and open. So it can get used for other events as well. It is not ADA accessible. So they've run into some problems with that. And honestly, I don't want to say it's small because it's not small, but it's small for, I mean, when you put 80 kids in there, it's small. So yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep.
So I am just writing notes from what Amy and Matt are saying, including perhaps a program, a community-led program that could start at this currently in use community center, and then it I don't know, I'm just making notes, but you guys please keep brainstorming. We're talking about the community art space.
Well, the reason, not to take over the conversation, but the reason why I was asking about that place is because I personally think that like starting a community art space is a big undertaking, but just taking over a room somewhere and starting is kind of a great way to get momentum before you take over, before you start this bigger undertaking. And so is there a place in the West Ward where you could, take over a room, do classes or whatever it is, I can think of several different things, but start doing little events there.
Matt, were you talking about the space up on Butler, 1120 Butler, where all the
No,
artists
not
do?
that place. I know that
Okay.
guy.
Okay,
Not
I
gonna
just
be
wanted
there.
to make sure that I didn't flip that conversation.
No,
incorrectly.
you're talking about the place I was wondering about. But anyway,
Okay.
my main thought is just a smaller one. It's like, is there a small room that we could take over somewhere in the West Ward to start a community art space on a small level?
Honestly, I feel like there's some churches that we could talk to. Like I know the church that's at 11th and Ferry has a lot of community space and rooms that, she was like, could I rent these out to other groups or to office space? So I feel like there's probably a lot of that in the neighborhood that could be utilized within church space, which is probably good. It would bring some revenue into some of our houses of worship, and who knows, maybe that's becomes an art space in a full-blown art space in the future, because as we know, churches are kind of dwindling as they are. So, I mean, that would be kind of a fantastic use of a church, a repurposed use of a church.
The two synagogues, or the former synagogue, the TCP has a very big social hall, as does the new the former B'nai Abraham, and they both have huge spaces, and I know the TCP used to rent its out. So I think a new church is in there, so they might be worth approaching because it's very central.
Thank you very much. I am catching up with the notes. Strategy. So we are talking about the two synagogues, right?
Well, former synagogue. One is a former synagogue.
You could call that the Life Church, Andrea. That would be the one at 15th Street.
On Northampton?
Yes.
Oh, I drive by it all the time. It's huge.
It's got a nice big social hall that you could use.
And then I'm blanking on the church that that's at 11th and Ferry.
I think that church is for sale. No, there's a church up there I saw on Zoom.
That's in the 800 block.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I call it the Purple Church because it has a purple awning out front. Yeah, that one's currently for sale, actually. Yeah.
On Butler?
No, on Ferry. That one's in the 800 block of Ferry. Yeah, but the one at 11th and Ferry has a lot of space in there. That is first floor level, a lot of individual rooms.
Okay, thank you very much. What about the concert and event series that we were talking about the last time?
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
Sorry,
Mhm.
Andrea, I just go back to the community art space.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
Thank you. So myself and some other people in the community have been meeting and putting together a plan for a community art space that would also unfold some of these other things that we ranked, including events and in particular youth outreach and mentorship programs. And also that would also kind of roll in our ideas about visiting artists or artist residents that would interact with the community and with the youth in the community. And possibly we would collaborate with other institutions in the city, like Lafayette College or Siegel Museum. So we're putting together a plan. We've reached out to a couple of organizations, to the board of a couple of organizations who are thinking about, the proposal to be an affiliate, somebody with a track record of fundraising. And we have two different organizations considering the proposal, and then going through what the legalese of that would be in terms of responsibility and depth of affiliation. And getting the application in for the 501c3 so that that's in place. And I don't know what else to say about that, but that it would be a community art space that is also a gallery and event space, and also would we envision it having a media arts lab, computers, doing exchanges, pedagogical exchanges with the affiliated organization, things called tech arts for girls, or now it's just tech arts for youth, where young people have access to, say, design and other kinds of art making software, media art making software, possibly a print shop, and spaces for more traditional arts, or I should say media technology arts. It would also include a screening and a space for the community to show the work that they make in community screenings and on the gallery walls. So we envision it sort of having also a small darkroom space too, so we're sort of pulling in these different mediums of printmaking, painting, media arts, and artists that work in all of these different mediums to create a space that's open for the community youth, and not just youth, but that would be the focus for sure in the West Ward. And as a person who lives here and has been even just out filming, say, the Black Lives Matter marches and talking to kids who are also holding cameras and getting a sense of what they're up to and what they're thinking about. And I think that this art space would I think we could really find the people in the community, the youth and the artists and other members of the community that want to be involved with the space.
I love it. Absolutely. This is so exciting to hear, Jen. I tried to make my notes as precise as I could. So you're working in creating the organization right now, right?
Yes.
That's amazing. So I think that we should definitely stay in touch as the plan continues its process, because when we are coming with the proposals or when we are looking for tenants or co-applicants, definitely we would want to explore possible ways that we can make this part of an inclusive strategy. Thank you. Anyone else has comments about the community art space? So let's talk about the concert and event series. I think that having a concert and outdoor event series that is programmable, or it runs through the whole summer, like every Saturday, movie night at the stadium. And I'm just brainstorming right now again. I think that it would be really great, because the community is something that people look forward to, oh, it's Saturday, let's go to the outdoor movie. So how do you guys feel about that? Yes, Matt.
I think it's cool, but I think that it should not just be for kids. I think that a lot of times, a lot of the community, and I'm not saying to play Rambo, but a lot of times the community building stuff focuses on kids and the colors that they use, the design, it's curated for kids, because you got to have, kids are going to be there. But I really think it's important to have something sophisticated for adults, so they don't get bored and they don't something that's for the adults. And not for me, I mean, for the parents, you know?
I agree with you. Thanks so much for bringing that up. That's very important too. Maybe only for kids. So we're talking about possibly like partnering with a brewery, for example, and have them
Yeah, I
have
think
a
that's a great
table,
idea. Or,
right?
yeah. And yeah, just like, you know, sometimes these things, it just looks like a schoolyard. And like I used to work at a middle school and it was such a challenge to like get the parents to hang around, you know, so we had to do things that were, you know, for like the parent teacher night, like it was such a challenge to get them to hang around. And like, I just think that doing something a little more sophisticated for the adults goes a long way.
Absolutely. Appealing and sophisticated. Thank you very much. Anyone else has comments? Yes?
I would just add that, thank you. I would just add that a concert and event series is also, again, something that could be born out of and organized through community collaborations through this art space that we're envisioning. A concert and an event series, I would think it needs a home, right? So people, like a group of people that are meeting and curating the events. And I agree, Matt, you know, film screenings, music, poetry, and things for children, but should be, you know, a diverse range of people that are interested in certain kinds of art mediums and others, for sure. And there would be a kind of consistency, right, with a local, you know, a localized and concentrated space where all of these sort of tentacles reach out, that would include, for sure, concerts, poetry readings, and other art events that could be outdoors or indoors, really, or both.
Absolutely, yes. So the event series should be over expanding beyond just concerts and movies. You're absolutely right. And give me just a second while I catch up with the notes. Tanya, you raised your hand.
To piggyback on what Matt said, and make it more like adult friendly, because I agree there are a lot of people that have moved into the area and don't have children, and people are having children later. I'm almost 30 years old. I don't have children, so I'm not totally interested in going to children events, although I obviously see the benefit of that. But maybe like an open mic event as like a concert or event series. Open mic can be a little more sophisticated.
Absolutely. I love it. Thank you very much. Great. Anything else about concerts and event series? We have a second question. If you don't have more comments about these 3 items, can we move on to the second part of the survey? Great. You guys have been great. Like, thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quick so I can send you the link again. Or if you still have the survey, it's the same link. Just click on the next page, or there should be a way that you scroll to the next page, and then it's the second question. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can get the second question on it. It looks like some of you already took the second question. Amazing. And now I share my screen. One moment. Okay, how does this look? How would you rank the following history strategies in terms of priority? Number 1, adaptive reuse of historic structures. We're talking about neighborhood walking tours to enhance identity. We talked about celebration of Easton Cemetery through events and tours, significant recognition of Native American culture. We talked about creating a museum space for the neighborhood, establishing a conservation district that Amy talked about a little bit already. Something like an Easton Sports Walk of Fame near Cottingham Stadium, or Westward History Coloring Book for Kids. You can take a minute to read the options. Make sure that you hit submit. And we will open the conversation in a couple minutes. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen again so I can see you. Give me 1 second while I make the notes. And it looks like the winning strategies were adaptive reuse of historic structures, then celebrating the Eastern Cemetery through events and tours, and creating a space for a neighborhood museum. Give me 1 second. So I am making the notes right now. Thank you for your patience. Anyone wants to start discussing how you guys feel about this ranking, and do you agree with the order of priorities right now? I can't see
Well, I
you.
can start. if you want me to.
Yes, go ahead.
So I don't care about any of this stuff. What I think is it has to look good. Whatever it is, it has to look good. It has to look sharp, and it has to be tight. It can't sprawl. That's my opinion. So there you go.
I agree with you so much. Well, not that I don't care about those stuff, but but yes, everything has to look good. I feel like anything less than appealing design and cohesive design and like nice and sharp looking should be unacceptable. And I feel like this brings us back to the conversation about design guidelines, right? So anyone else wants to
Interestingly, I don't think that there should be a historic preservation, like the way that they have the I forget what it is downtown where you have to, what's it called? I'm losing my words. I think that they should
Historic
not do that in the West Ward.
okay,
It makes
okay.
it really difficult.
Mm-hmm. And the third option was neighborhood museum space. Great. Museum space.
Somebody tell me I'm wrong. Somebody,
I think you're wrong, Matt.
there you go.
I think we need something because these houses have been so butchered in ways that it starts to detract from the neighborhood as a whole. And it doesn't have to be as stringent as the downtown. I think there's things that I think it would also help with a lot of the landlord issues. And Liz, this is not directed at you, but some of our landlords do really crappy shit in the neighborhood because there's nothing that holds them to a higher standard. And it pulls down the neighborhood because they can put in the cheaper windows that don't really fit because it doesn't matter. Nobody's there to say otherwise. And it really starts to detract from the other houses around. And I think that's part of this. I think some of the things that were looked at for the conservation district are really manageable and a lot less drastic than the historic district in the downtown, but allow the architecture and the character to stay.
I also
And-
think just having, oh, sorry, Amy.
That's all right. He walked away from me. He was like,
Okay.
F you, walk away.
No, I was listening. I was filling my tea. I'm sorry.
I also think, retaining that unique architecture, not to the point where it doesn't allow for the creativity to happen too, but retaining that architecture sort of gives the neighborhood a sense of place and like history and sort of something to be proud of. Like this is who we are and this is who we've been, and it creates like a uniqueness about the place too, which I think can be good.
Yeah, like that house I was talking about earlier, Matt, I think it's in the next block down from you, but they ripped off the aluminum siding. They're putting up all new siding. It looks very suburban, and I think that's what's happening, is that's the fast and cheap thing to do. You go to Home Depot, you buy what you can there, and it becomes this kind of suburban look, and it loses that architecture. They get rid of the arched windows and the trim work, and like Laura said, all those pieces that really give you a sense of place, that make it so attractive, that is attractive to a lot of people. Yeah.
I agree.
I think you're definitely right that, if there was some teeth to what you could do and not do, because as someone who's dealt with the historic district stuff and the West Ward, like it's difficult to get something done in the historic district. You do have to jump through a lot of hoops to do that. I wouldn't want to see it that difficult, but as a landlord, I can tell you that the profit's not what everybody thinks it is on small properties, and replacing a slate roof with slate is a problem. It's expensive, and so things like I feel both sides of this. We try really hard not to do to kind of keep things the way they were, but it's expensive to do. So I feel both sides of that. But having some teeth that required people to not do certain things, I think, is probably the better way to go.
Can I interject unless someone else has their hand up and I can see them?
I just kind of wanted to give another thought to this too. So Matt, this was actually used in Philly because they found there were a lot of row homes that were built in a block, and they all had these really small front yards to them and with a small front porch. And as time went on and cars became more popular, people ripped out that front porch and created a driveway and a garage, and totally lost that front yard and that front porch. And it just became this block that nobody interacted anymore. So that was one of the reasons in that neighborhood they did a conservation district, because it wasn't really about a historic feature, but it allowed you to maintain a more urban feel to certain things. So that's one of the awesome things about a conservation district, is that you can kind of tailor these things that make it feel more urban and less suburban. For instance, closing in porches could be part of a conservation district, because you want people to have porches and not be closed off, and so it's things like that can be helpful and allow you to maintain the city peace here, as opposed to going in a more suburban kind of car-centric and I'm receding into my house kind of feel for things too. So keep that in mind. Like the conservation district is really, it can be about architecture and historic pieces, but it can also be about an urban living feeling that you want to continue in a neighborhood.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
I wanted to interject and then I forgot what I was going to say. So please carry on.
And I wanted to say, I'm not picking on you, Matt, because I kind of directed that at you, but I'm not picking on
No,
you.
that's okay. I said I didn't care about any of the stuff intentionally to get people to talk. Oh, I lost my screen. Sorry, I'm totally messed up here.
Thank you. So we are talking about preserving, or yes, Elizabeth?
Just a quick question. Amy, you said that there was an attempt to do a conservation district. What happened to that?
Yeah, it's really been tabled. Like I said, there's a political piece to this. And some of the people that have been working on it, it's been difficult. And because certain people are involved, it's been difficult.
Can you explain a little bit about how that process happens? Like what needs to happen?
Yeah, so there were a bunch of meetings that were pulled together. They were actually done in it kind of was an outcropping of what was happening up on College Hill with the college and their encroachment into the neighborhood. And there were conversations about a conservation district. So there were some public meetings that were held and really organized by community members in College Hill and West Ward. There was an attempt to do something over in South Side, but there really isn't like a strong organization over there that, you know, they just didn't have neighbor support over there. So there was interest in both College Hill and West Ward doing a conservation district. And as things were moving along with the college, they pulled back on that. And there was some focus by that leader of the group to focus on West Ward some more, but he doesn't have a good, I don't know. There's just some people in the community that don't want to work with him. So it's been difficult to move that through. It was presented, it was odd because we didn't have a good way to work through getting something like this enacted. We went to the Planning Commission in the hopes that the Planning Commission could give us some guidance, and they sort of did. And then they wanted us, you know, there was no clear road for it. It also becomes who is the administrator for something like this? Like if you want to put new windows in, who says, yes, these are the right windows and the right size? Do you leave that up to the codes department? Is there something similar to the historic board that you would go before to get your stamp of approval? And there was conversation about, is that too taxing if it went to the current historic board? So it was just kind of, there wasn't a clear route as to where to go. And then there was a lot of, as always, a lot of misinformation out there, and people didn't listen and got, oh, well, you can't tell me what to do with my property. And, you know, not listening to the whole story. And so things were just kind of like pulled back on it too, even though it came up in our neighborhood plan, it came up in the city comp plan. It is in both of those documents that West Ward should have a conservation district in there. It's just, there's no clear route to get something like that, you know, enacted. And maybe it's something that my organization through the West Ward Community Initiative needs to lead instead of these other folks. It really needs neighborhood support too, and a lot of education, because there's a lot of people out there who are like, you're not going to tell me what color to paint your house. And it's like, no, that's not what we're trying to do. So that's the other piece to it here as well.
So how recently did it stall?
Man, I'm going to say at least a year ago, maybe more. I don't know if, yeah, I actually, now that I say that, right before COVID hit, we went to I feel like it was the Planning Commission meeting, and they were very positive about this, but then the elected political will has kind of put the kibosh on it. So within the last,
it definitely sounds like something that would be very helpful to have.
Mm-hmm.
So is there, I mean, I think, you know, maybe not here, but it's definitely something worth talking about trying to maybe co-op from these other people and try and push it through again.
I think where we stood as our design guidelines are, you know, they were reflective of what was in the conservation district. And I think using something like that as a stepping stone to a conservation district could be really helpful. Because if we put those out as guidelines to receive a facade grant, it kind of pushes people to, you have to comply to this if you want money.
Right.
So, and maybe that's how things are pushed forward then too. Yeah, we have a lot of, you know, we have homeowners who are on my running list of facade grants, but I also have a significant amount of landlords too, and that kind of pushes them to do better with how they maintain their properties.
Just if you, so you're talking about education as well. If you want someone to work with you on like some kind of a brochure or something that could be delivered to houses, let me know and we can talk.
I like that a lot. I like that a lot, Liz. That would be really great.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, Amy, for that information. Definitely, it gives us a lot to think about. We have 7 minutes left in the allotted time for this meeting, and we are yet to talk about the last two strategies that we talked about. I don't want to finish this meeting without talking about cemetery tours and guided walks, because I feel like a way of celebrating the heritage and celebrating green space and resources and the history that has happened here is through having guided walks and cemetery tours. I have only driven by the cemetery, and I think that it is a wonderful one. I mean, from an outsider point of view, I think that it is a wonderful asset. And from our last conversation, I'm under the impression that it is just underutilized. Is there? I actually have a question for you guys. Is there an organization, or is the cemetery run through an institution that we should partner with in order to create tours and walks and events?
I know there's interest to do more of this now lately. They have their own board that manages the cemetery. It's a private entity that runs both the Easton Cemetery and the Easton Heights Cemetery. They recently merged last year. Financial stability is their biggest priority right now. But I feel like there's some renewed interest in doing things there. They're holding a 5K in the cemetery this May. So that's a big step. They're trying to financially repair the roads there. So this is a fundraiser to do that. And they've done some like really cool tours in the past. They had an artist that selected people that had been buried there of historical significance, did these beautiful watercolors, and then there were docents at those graves. And so you could walk around and the docent gave you an amazing history of who that person was. So they did that twice, and it was really outstanding. And so I feel like, yeah, if it's a group of volunteers, you know, that are on that board, really. So
I think that
yeah.
we should get them to our next meeting. I
Okay.
think that would be really great. And can I share with you guys an example of something I saw in Buffalo? So there's a cemetery right in the center of the city. It's called Forest Lawn, and it was designed by a very, very famous landscape architect. And the cemetery is a green space in the middle of the city, so a lot of people just go out there to run all the time. But they do events. They do like guided walks every Sunday at 1 p.m. There is like a volunteer that just walks everyone through like important graves of people who used to live here. And it's just like outdoor time that people perhaps are not having right now because they don't know that they can go to the cemetery. So I just wanted to bring it up as an example because I have seen it done in other cities. I think that Buffalo and Easton are not too different from each other. That's why I always keep bringing examples from there. So thank you guys for listening to my example. Laura, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking along those lines, it'd be cool definitely to have it in person, but it'd be cool if they had some type of website where you could do a self tour too, because that would just make it accessible to everybody, or like kids who are too cool to like go on the tour, but
Totally.
could actually use, the internet to do a walkthrough, and sort of that would also add to the sense of place. Oh, look at this place that we live in, and sort of learn about it. And sort of make it a more interesting public space.
Absolutely. Is there a historic commission or a historic group of people that they have been keeping the archives of the important things that have been happening for the last couple hundreds of years or something that maybe we should invite to the table? And it's okay if we run out of time and you don't know, guys. I see Matt raised his hand.
Oh, yeah, but I don't have to know the answer to that question. If you want to
Not
stick
a problem.
You know, the one thing I did see on there that it's not necessarily about history, in fact, it's not at all about history, was the skate park.
Mhm.
Laura, like the kids who are too cool to go are going to be at the skate park. And I really like, it would be cool. I think, I mean, this is like a corny idea, but yeah, if you are going to build a skate park, which would be awesome. If it was linked, tied in with Easton, if it was like, I know you guys probably don't skate, but like if, you're grinding the Sal Panto monument, I think like things like that could really, really get kids in, and like the skate park is always like a very lively place. And I think if you had an Easton themed skate park, you could generate interest among young people about the things that were noted in the skate park, whether it was like, whatever the historical significance of the obstacles in the skate park were.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And the link doesn't have to be physical. It can be like a scavenger hunt or like go check this place out or something. I love that. Thank you so much for that, Matt. We are exactly time. Anyone has closing remarks before we close this conversation? You guys have been fantastic. Thank you so much for your time tonight. So if this is it for you guys, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I want to thank all of you guys for your participation. Our next meeting is going to be the last week of March. Bear with me and I will tell you exactly when is our meeting. My computer is acting up, so really bear with me, please. Wow, I don't have it in my calendar. Our next meeting is going to be Wednesday, the 23rd, March 23rd. And is this time okay, or do you guys want to push it back to its original time, 3:30?
This is a good time, I think, for me.
Yes. Feel free to follow up by email if you guys want to continue this conversation. I am writing my email on the chat. Andrea@collaboplanning.com. Thank you guys, and I look forward to seeing you guys at our next event, and we will increase our outreach in order to bring these folks that we talked about today. Hopefully they will be able to join us in our next meeting. So thanks everybody. Stay safe, stay warm, and have a great evening.
Thanks, Andrea.
Bye-bye.